Preparing. Come on. Nearly there. Oh, yep. Right. We are live on YouTube. Hi, everyone on YouTube. And we're about to go live on Zoom. So one ticket. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome back to Pushing the Limits. Your host, Lisa Tamati here, sitting in New Zealand and ready for a fantastic interview. Today, I have a bit of a hard ass with me. I think it's a bit hard to describe this man and what he's done. I have Dean Stott with me. Dean, welcome to the show. It's fantastic to have you. Yeah, you're sitting in Orange County?
That's it. Yeah, moved to Orange County in California 6 months ago. Actually, in the middle of the pandemic, just took advantage of the world pausing and just changed scenery.
Just a change of scenery, right, Dean? We're going to have a really interesting conversation because when I discovered you actually through another friend's podcast, my Vitality. Shout out to Sean and everyone over there, and I realised that we had the same title of our books. Where's your one, mate?
Yeah. That's it.
Relentless. My one's a bit smaller. I thought, this guy's probably right up my alley. So, Dean, you are known as the Frogman. You've been in the Special Forces, Special Boat Services. You have also become an expeditionary athlete, an adventurer in latter years. But I want to go back a little bit and let's start into, were you always this determined and crazy and like head through the wall type of person? Tell us a little bit about your background for starters.
Yeah, so I don't know whether I was. It's on reflection, you look back and think, yeah, maybe I was slightly. You touched on I was in the military. My father was in the military, and I grew up surrounded by that in that environment, but it was never like forced upon me to continue any sort of tradition and things like that. My father was the army football manager and coach, so he was very sports oriented, what we would call a tracksuit soldier. He very much, his career was based on his sporting abilities. So there was that competitive drive anyway that I had from my father. My parents split up when I was a young age, and when I was about 8 years old, I moved away with my mother for a couple of years, and my father then got custody of me and my sisters. So he went back to live with my dad. So I only had the single parent, and we just went everywhere with him. And it was all with the military and all these sporting events. I wasn't, the children of today with technology, when we were younger, as you all know, no, you weren't allowed in the house unless it was absolutely raining or pitch black. So we had some a natural physical robustness. But I joined the military. Well, I approached my father and told him my intentions of joining the military when I was 17, and he told me I'd last 2 minutes. I don't know whether that was reverse psychology for me to push harder and prove him wrong. But I was about 65 kilos and 5'7", so I wasn't the figure of the man that I am today. But when I did join the military, I then went through training and things like that. And I didn't have aspirations of being special forces or commandos or anything like that. I wasn't even really aware about the structure of the military anyway, because it was just sport. That's all I'd seen with my dad. I hadn't seen the bigger picture. But then when I passed basic training, it's only 10 weeks long, you then get a little bit of confidence in your abilities. And then you started in a short period of time, by the age of 21 actually, I was a para commando, a diver and a PTI. I'd done every arduous course within the military, but I'd grown so quick over those 2 or 3 years. And I was probably about 85 kilos now and 5'11". So I was getting confident in my own abilities, and I was also growing into the individual that I was today. And then once you pass a certain threshold or pass a course, you then sort of look at, well, what's next? I wasn't the best on the courses, but I just gave it my 100%. And then it's sort of your career then starts channeling in one direction. You then those before you or your peers and mentors are all going special forces, and it's like the next question is, well, why not? Let's have a crack.
Yeah, but it takes a special type of person to be able to, like. I grew up in a family with lots of stories. Like my dad was only in the military for a short time, but he was a firefighter. And so, my husband's a firefighter, my dad's a firefighter, my brother's a firefighter. We're a firefighter family. And when I was a little girl, I couldn't grow up to be a firefighter. It wasn't, unfortunately, thank God they can now. And, if my dad had his way, I would have been a firefighter. I would have been an SAS soldier. I would have been because he was a hard ass. Yeah. And he wanted all of that for me. And, unfortunately, society sort of stopped some of the things. So I ended up doing it in other ways that I could do it. But wasn't there a lot of pressure? Did you feel like you had to live it up? Your dad saying that to you, was that said in jest, do you think, or did that really bite with you that, hey, I'm going to prove you wrong? You know what I'm going for?
Yeah, I think for me it was, and we'll talk about other stories in my career, and it seems to be a common theme. I thought there's no point in arguing with my father, or anyone, if someone disagrees or doesn't think you're going to do it. The best way to prove them wrong is actually by physically doing it.
Yeah.
And then you don't even need to say anything. You just leave that pause. And so I think for him, I don't know. I think it was a throwaway comment. The fact that I still talk about it now. It did stick in my. A lot of people would say to me, "Would you say that to your son?" I said, "Of course I wouldn't." But for me, it was that drive. My father, we talked about. He was sport oriented. Actually, when I joined the military, I got sent to Germany to play football as well because they knew I was Dave Stott's son.
Yeah.
And it was actually after a year of being there that I said, no, I don't want to follow the same footsteps as my father. I want to carve my own path. And that's when I then went commando, para, and things like that. So I was going a different path from my father. He wasn't a para or a commando and things like that. So for me, it was like this was new territory to me. I wasn't really put under pressure from him. I know a lot of guys who I served with, from a young age, from young boys, all they ever wanted to be was a Royal Marine or a para. They wanted to be in SAS and things like that. I didn't. I wasn't. That's something I didn't.
You weren't conditioned that way.
I wasn't even aware of it. That was why. So when I approached these courses, I didn't put myself under that self-induced pressure which some of these guys and girls do. And I think that helped in a way. I sort of approached it in a, it is what it is. We're not being naive. It's not.
As to what was involved.
It's walk in the park. But I was aware how difficult it was. But it wasn't the be all or end all. Some guys you see that don't achieve the grades or the standards, and then they're broken. That's all they wanted all their life. And I think it's actually too much pressure on themselves.
Yep.
So sort of going into these situations, you just need to be a bit open-minded.
And what was the to go into the special forces and to end up what you did? What is it like to go through? Because we see the stuff on the telly, and everybody knows about how hard ass all that type of training is, and what you need. What did you get out of it? What was the experience like for you to do those extreme sort of courses?
Yeah, for me, I think it's very much a grown-up course. The way that you got this stuff on TV where you have the perception it's hard ass and everyone's swearing and shouting at you, and it is night and day from that. I understand with TV there's a fine line between authenticity and entertainment.
Yeah, because
actually if you film selection, it's actually quite boring. Because guys just get told where they got to go and they just do it. So that's what I liked about the course, is that the fact that you're all treated as grown-ups. There was no shouting. They just told you what to do. They didn't need to shout. The selection was that hard in itself that they didn't need to put that additional pressure on you. So I did like that, and the fact that they gave you some sort of independence, to think on your own. I was fortunate to be an instructor on the commando course and also the senior dive instructor. So I've seen it from an instructor's perspective. And on those sort of courses, you do give the students some motivation and inspiration as well. But on this one, you don't get anything. You actually get the reverse when you go to the jungle, and they tell you about how you're not doing well and, you know, just give up now and save 6 months of your life and things like that. But again, I've had that reverse psychology as a young boy telling me I couldn't do it. So, and
that's what it is.
And for me, I didn't go I came from the army. So the normal traditional route was the special SAS. I went SBS. I was one of the first army guys to do that. And that was because I'd spent 8 years with 3 Commander Brigade Recce Force, and I was a senior dive instructor. So water, I was more comfortable in water. So the special boat service was that natural transition for me. So they say when you go on selection, be the grey man, you know, just don't stand out, don't bring attention to yourself and things like that. I was the grey man for about 2 minutes because they were like, you know, they screamed my name out and asked why I was going this way and not the traditional.
Right, because you come from the wrong place.
Although I didn't put myself under my own self-induced pressure, I had that sort of hovering above my head. But again, if you're confident in your abilities, you know, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. You know, at that stage, I was a 28-year-old sergeant, and I spent 7 years in Brigade Recce. I'd seen those who'd gone before me, and I knew that I was just as good as them. And you sort of know that they're going to play these mind games. So when they come, as long as you identify when they're coming and just deflect it.
Yep. Has that really helped you in everything that you've done since? Like, what are some of the key learnings that you take away from doing such arduous, tough, scary stuff?
I think, you know, you can't control the uncontrollables. You know, as long as you have a plan. One thing I sort of really take from the military is that meticulous planning and detail that goes into it, and the fact that we rehearse. You know, we do that over and over and over again. You know, I've been guest speaking alongside some of the England rugby players, and they talk about the World Cup, about how they repeat an exercise 100 times to get 1% better. You know, we'll rehearse all these different scenarios. But ours is a bit of a different situation. You know, if we get it wrong or pause or hesitate, you know, we don't lose 5 points on the rugby pitch. We lose lives. You know, guys, people will get killed. So there's that which I really took from the military, is that unrelenting pursuit of excellence, trying to be the best you can be. But also, as well as the planning, and that I'll probably talk about later on the bike ride, is the fact that nothing always goes to plan.
No,
you're getting the best plan in the world, you know, and things never go to plan, and don't worry about that. And that's what I liked about the special forces, is they were like, well, if you don't go to plan, you just react to the situation that's in front of you. And a good friend of mine told me a quote: "You can't be experienced without experiences." And that's what I got from the military. The military, a lot of these big corporates around the world would love to try and replicate the scenarios or conditions that these people have been in, but you just can't. And that's the great thing about the military. They put you in some high octane environments, in difficult positions, difficult environments, and having to make difficult decisions. But you learn from that, you know, whether it was the right decision, whether it was the wrong decision. You know, when you go into
have to make
scenario, you just reflect back on what worked and what didn't work.
Wow. So you were in the military for, I think it was 16 years, was it, or something?
That was it, yeah, correct. Yeah, 16 years.
Yeah. And so it was a big chunk of your life. And then what happened? Tell us about the accident.
So I joined the Special Forces on the height of the war on terror. So I was, you know, I was at the pinnacle of my career. Everything was going really well. I was doing what these children nowadays play Call of Duty. You know, that was my lifestyle.
Wow.
Day in, day out. And we're just about to go pre-deployment training to go back out to Afghanistan again. And we were out training in Oman, and I was doing what's called a Heiho Jumps. It's a high altitude, high opening jump. So unlike free fall, where you're free aligned, you're actually still connected to the aircraft. You exit the aircraft at 15,000 feet, and you do that because that's the limits of oxygen. Any higher and you need oxygen. Jump out of the aircraft and the parachute will pull open straight away. I mean, you travel up to 50 kilometers or 30 minutes in the air to your target area. So we've done hundreds of these jumps before. I think it was about the third or fourth jump of the day. And I just exited the aircraft as I normally did, no different from any time before. But this time when I looked, there was something wrong, and my leg was actually caught in the line above my head. So I was trying to clear my leg in time before the parachute opened, and potentially took my leg off, but I couldn't clear it in time. The parachute opened, pulled my leg up over my head and to the right. Thankfully, my foot released, and otherwise I wouldn't be here having this conversation. But straight away, I knew there was a problem. The pain was so severe that I was vomiting, and because of the oxygen, how thin the air was, I was drifting in and out of consciousness. But no one else in the team knew there was a situation, so I wasn't going to come over the net and tell everyone I had a sore leg. So I managed to stay with the team, assess where the other parachutes were coming in against the wind, and my first challenge was to land it, because if I didn't land it correctly, on one leg, potentially you damage your good leg. So, but I did. It was a great landing. Landed one-legged.
Wow.
Fortunately, the damage sustained on the exit shortened my career. So I tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus, my hamstring, my calf, and my quadricep. So it was also all the supporting muscles.
It's got ripped.
Yeah, just got ripped. But the ideal world, you would go straight back to UK and you'd start physio, you just start working on it. But it was the same time as the Icelandic volcano, which had grounded all aircraft.
Oh, yeah. So,
I was there for about nearly 5 weeks, just thrown in a hotel with painkillers. So that initial
you're kidding. So there was
period, I sort of missed that, and then got back to UK, got air embedded back to UK, got sent home for 6 weeks on leave. So now talking about 12 week period from the injury. Then they lost my MRI scans, and it was just a spiral of errors within the medical system there. And so I left, and all I'd ever known, in 16 years was the military. And then even as a young child growing up, so I didn't look beyond the military. For me, I was a lifer. That was me.
Wow. So how did that, apart from the going to the physical injury, but how did that affect you mentally? Like you suddenly, you're at the top of your game, you've been training for this forever, you're doing your job, and then all of a sudden you're out of the game and you're completely sidelined. What happened to you mentally from that side?
You speak to my wife, she'll tell you a different.
You didn't get divorced, so that's good.
No, but because one of the things, it's called an identity crisis.
Yeah.
And it's whether you believe in the military, whether you're a professional sports person, or whether you're just someone who works in an organization or a team. But I'd gone from working in a tight-knit unit, having a role, having a purpose, knowing what I was doing for the next 2 years, to like, where do I now fit in society? What is my now role and purpose? But I got to where I got to because of my physical robustness. That had now been taken away from me as well. I couldn't even run 100 meters without my leg being in pain. So I had that going on in the background. Also, to add to the pressure, my wife was 8 months pregnant. So we're also wondering whether, there's going to be any work there. How am I going to support my family? So thankfully for me, my wife is very entrepreneurial. You hear horror stories of men and women when they leave the military about their transition can be quite turbulent. Mine was quite smooth. The military are like your mother and father. They clothe you, they feed you, they pay you on time. You don't even know who provides the water or the heat. You just got a job to do. But when we leave, we're not aware of who we need to speak to in the councils or the state to this. So my wife was a bank manager for 3 Santander banks in Aberdeen. So the stuff that I would normally be worrying about, she was like, I've got all that. And she set up our first security company on a BlackBerry watching TV. I was like,
wow.
For me, I've never done the right paperwork. So although I was going through a hard time having to sort of personally, thankfully it wasn't that bad because my wife had sort of was supporting.
She's awesome.
But as I said, talked about the security industry, the pressure of trying to if there's any work, and I was very fortunate. Within 48 hours, I was asked if I can go out to Libya, which I know you're familiar with, to help set up the DFID project, which was part of the British Embassy during the Arab Spring, and so that's what I did. So thankfully for me, I had work straight away, and I was out in Benghazi. helping set up that project.
Can you tell us a little bit about that story? Because that sounded like a bit of a movie story, that one.
Yes. So for me, when I left, I wanted to find a niche within the security industry. I didn't want to go to Afghanistan and Iraq and do the hostile section, because I'd sort of done that. I'd done that bit, and I was very lucky that I'd survived. So why would you take another risk? And I looked at the security industry, and actually, a lot of my friends from the Special Boat Service, they had their maritime companies who were dealing with the piracy off the east coast of Africa. So I didn't want to sort of be competing with them either. My wife's from Aberdeen, so I moved back to Scotland with her, and it's the oil and gas capital of Europe. So where there's oil, there's trouble. So I was looking more at the corporate close protection sort of industry. That's where my head was focused. But when I got to Libya, I soon identified that the Libyans didn't want Libya being another Afghan or Iraq. Once Gaddafi had fallen, they wanted to take control. But also these larger security companies, I call them the big five, who sort of like dominate the industry. They were charging crisis management and evacuation plans when actually when you scrape the surface, there was nothing in place. Wow. So I flew home. My wife gave birth to our daughter Molly, and I said, look, I have a plan. Do you mind if I take our savings out of the bank? And that's what I did. And I went back into Libya, and there was a huge proliferation of weapons at this point. It was actually the ammunition that was difficult to get hold of. Weapons was not a problem. So I bought 30 weapons off the black market, and I buried them between Tunis and Egypt, and buried them with communications equipment, money, and just designed my own evacuation plan. Spent a month in the desert writing these and designing them. And I sold them to a couple of the oil and gas companies on a retainer, and just sat on them. And then the security industry, for me, I didn't want to work for an organization and be on rotation and things like that. I took a gamble, and it was very ad hoc. So each time I got a phone call was a different job. So, for example, we did London Olympics, and then, next thing you're taking the UAE Royal Family Super Yacht from Barcelona to Maldives. One phone call and you're training the Kurdish Special Forces in Erbil. So
fascinating.
It's very diverse. When you tell people in the security industry, I think they think you're a doorman from the local nightclub.
No.
Diverse.
No, surely not.
Yeah, and I'd like to help people as well. And for me, but what it was good for me is I was seeing some of the countries that I've been to anyway with the military, but seeing all the cultures and seeing how things are not from a military perspective, because it was almost a little bit blinkered there,
like you say, you had your role, and
it was understanding more the politics, the demographics, and things like that. So I'd just come back from the London Olympics. I was in Benghazi, and the evening the American ambassador got killed. And they made a film called 13 Hours. And
that's one. That's why I thought that sounds very familiar. Like, I'm sure I've seen this movie.
So I always say right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time. And I was there in Benghazi, and I was asked by a German oil company if I could get some of their German engineers from Benghazi to Tripoli. So I had safe houses in the desert, and that's what I did over the 3 days. I took them back to Tripoli. Them out. Yeah, and then 2 years later, I was in Brazil covering the World Cup.
You just like just sprinkle. You just got them out through a whole like you do that, like going to the supermarket. Like
well, there's no real threat to them, no direct threat to them. The only issue I had with that one, I had drivers from Benghazi who took us out initially. The problem you got in Libya, you have 167 tribes. And this is where there's real issues in the country, because you have those in the east in Benghazi don't like those in the west in Tripoli. The politics are in Tripoli, the oil's in the east. So it's understanding that as well, and that's why. So we did it over 3 days, and the reason we did that is I had the drivers from Benghazi in the safe house, and they're like, well, Mr. Dean, we can go on because Tripoli's only, it's not far, 300 kilometers. But they didn't realize I had drivers coming in from Tripoli.
You didn't want them to mix.
Because I didn't want the drivers to compromise us when we go in. So I woke up the morning that we were setting off, and the drivers had arrived from Tripoli, the drivers from Benghazi there. They all had their guns out. And
oh my God.
I said, look, I think they're worried they weren't going to get paid. I said, no, you're paid. I just can't take you to Tripoli. And so it's just understanding that sort of.
So that
rather than just driving as fast as you could to Tripoli and potentially running into issues along the way.
Wow.
And so that was a success. And then 2 years later, I was in Brazil covering the World Cup, and we now had the Tripoli War, which is a civil war between the militias and the government. And I think that's just ended now, nearly 7 years later. And I got a phone call from the Canadian embassy saying that they'd been stuck in Tripoli and if I could assist them. So they had 18 military with them. They had a close protection team with them, but they weren't allowed to leave the city. So they'd never seen the coastal road out and didn't have really eyes on. So in the days leading up to that, the British embassy got shot at every checkpoint between Tripoli and the Tunis border. So I went out with my fixer and, just spoke to the tribal elders in those regions, Zawara and everywhere else. And it was actually just showing them courtesy and respect, just letting them know who we were, when we were coming, that we were no threat. And again, it's that understanding the politics and the demographics, which was a success of that. And we got 18 military and 4 diplomats safely back to Tunis.
Wow.
But I've never, it sounds very sexy in Hollywood, but I never needed to dig up any of the weapons. They're still there.
They're still on there.
It's more of an intelligence-led security thing. But I came home from that trip, and my normal procedure would be to wash my kit, repack my bag and everything else, and then get ready for the next phone call. But one of my shirts was covered in blood, where I'd been doing first aid at an RTA, and I said to my wife, "Can we get the blood out of the shirt?" She said, "Yes, but I'm more concerned in why there's blood in there." I told her what I'd just done, and she's have you heard yourself? It's like a throwaway comment.
Yeah.
This was the second time in my life that I realised the pin dropped. There was something wrong mentally. This was 5 years now from the military, and I was trying to match the adrenaline rush that I had when I was in, without coming to terms with the fact that I'd left and I didn't have that support network. If something had gone wrong, my friends weren't going to come in and parachute for me and things like that. So something had to change, and my daughter was young, and my wife now, she had a very successul property development business, and she said, "Look, it was actually all about communication." She thought I wanted to go away, and I thought she needed me to go away.
Because you've been used to that sort of setup for so long.
And I'd just been disconnected from society. I just thought that was the norm. I was going to Somalia on my own, Yemen on my own, just doing these jobs.
Were you not like most people listening to this? I mean, it's such a foreign world for the average person who's never been exposed to any of this, and I've never been anything military. I've been in some tricky situations, self-caused, going into shit places I wasn't ready for or shouldn't have been in, but. For most people, this is a terrifying thought to even go to some of these places, let alone to do the job that you do. Did you never have a fear? Do you not have the normal fear responses that most people have?
No, I think I do. I think the problem we have in today's society is TV, is media. It's very, dramatized about these places. I go to some of these places. I'll use Somalia as an example. I'll go there on my own, and I'll walk from the airport to the hotel. I won't, because that's where the business is. That's where things are happening. I mean, I've been, yes, there's bad places and things go on, but it's no different from any city. Yes, there's a bit of a terrorist threat and things like that. But I've been, spearfishing south of Mogadishu in some of the most beautiful waters. I see parts of the country that people don't see. I'm not naive to think there is no threat at all. The success of a lot of my projects is having the right fixers and local influence. The world's very quick to tarnish certain societies with one brush because of what they're seeing on TV. Where they're the most hospitable people. The Canadian Embassy, the KCA Deutag, and a few others. They wouldn't have been successful if it wasn't for
the local people.
Locals. Yeah. And I think that's where some of these security companies or individuals who think they can just come in with weapons, and guys that look like me are very arrogant to think they're gonna get away with it, and it's just showing respect and humility to them, and that's my approach to it. So I am obviously conscious there is a threat, and I have friends who
and you can handle yourself,
as well, and things like that. But I think.
But it's not as I know what you mean. Like when you go to some of these places, you have these preconceived ideas, and some of the places I've been to, like Niger. I went to Niger. I don't know if you know Niger. I don't even know how to say it properly. Niger, whatever. Niger. I never got that right. And that was one place where I landed there, and we were doing a 333k race through there, and I did like go, oh shit, this place is pretty damn scary. And you're running across the desert on your own, and there was a lot of military sort of, well, it was a oil problem. Chinese doing exploration in the desert against the wishes of the tribal people. So there was lots of military convoys coming through with all armed things, and you're a little girl running across the freaking desert on your own. Like it's pretty hairy moments there where you think you can just disappear. But generally speaking, most of the places that you go to where you think are going to be terrifying aren't that terrifying. And the people are pretty amazing too, and you got to be aware of yourself, and
But I think that the responsibility, those sort of places as well, if they're running an event like that, those countries want, it's all about tourism and trying to put the country in a good light. They'll do everything.
This one was a bit out there though. Like this was a French Foreign Legion guy who was running it. And he didn't give a shit about anything except making money, right? So
really?
we went into it naively, this particular one, thinking it was going to be like the Marathon des Sables or something, you know what I mean? And it wasn't. It was like 17 runners. Nothing was organized. It was like we ran out of water. We ran out of food. I ended up getting food poisoning on top of it all. So that was a really, that's when I realized that most of the races are really super well run, but then there are the cowboys out there. And we were in our very heads really, and we were lucky to get out the other side on that one. But, it is, but so how did you like for your wife, what's it like having your husband off doing God knows what and having to keep the business going, the life going, and feeling that fear of you being away,
I'm very fortunate. I've got my wife's part of the business anyway, the security business anyway, so she would always be doing the intelligence pictures anyway, so having her being part of that helps well, rather than you just go in and she's not knowing what's going on and then coming back, having her part of that. And when we talk about the bike ride, she was the campaign director for that. So
sounds amazing.
She gets involved in everything, because then it's very easy to explain why you're doing something or why you're going away, because she has the full picture. But no, very, very fortunate to have an understanding. And Alana's got a book coming out soon as well. And she talks about, why she fell in love with me, because I showed her a world that she hadn't seen before. I mean, I was we had very similar mindsets and like achieve whatever goals you want. So for her to then say I couldn't do something, or would go against what she thinks would be and why we got together. So obviously now I'm a bit older and we've got kids, and obviously I need to be a bit, she reins me in a little bit more.
She sounds like an amazing lady. I'll have to get her on.
She is. She's got a cracking story herself.
Yeah, she sounds like it. So I want to transition now into going into life after this sort of chapter of your life, if you like, and becoming this professional adventurer. Because in what you're doing now, what you've got coming up, and the whole world record that you have, tell us about that big adventure.
So it actually stemmed from coming back from that Canadian embassy job. Something had to change.
Yeah.
In chapter 16 in the book's called Dead or Divorced, so that's the stage we're at in here. And I talked about, obviously, it's been 5 years since my leaving the military. I'd sort of neglected my own sort of physical and mental well-being. I'd been so fixated on work and bringing money in. I'd take like a TRX with me around, just throw it in the suitcase, but I hadn't done any sort of cardiovascular stuff. My injured leg now was 2 kilos lighter than my good leg because of the mental wastage. So I just bought, Alana said, look, come do property developing with her. And that's what I did. I hung up my security boots and just bought a push bike off Amazon, just cycled to and from the office. It was only about 8 miles there and 8 miles back, nothing big, but straight away being physically active again. I felt like there was a big weight off my shoulders, and that's what I did. I just cycled to and from the office. But you can imagine my story, sat in these architects and planners meetings. I was like, no. So it was about a month before my 40th birthday. So I was having a midlife crisis, having ground about, what have I done with my life? I'm going to have a legacy and things like that. So I said, well, I've always fancied doing a world record. And Alana said, well, what in? And I said, well, cycling's good because it's not impacting I had to be considerate of my knee injury, and something that the knee injury wasn't going to have compromise it. So I said, what about cycling? And, being in Scotland, I was thinking maybe like Aberdeen to Glasgow or something. And my wife then found the world's longest road, which runs from southern Argentina to northern Alaska. So for the listeners, it's probably equivalent to it's the equivalent of cycling from London to Sydney, and then 4,000 miles,
and then another.
Another because of the curvature of the earth. So having only cycled 20 miles, that's what I did. I applied for the world record to begin it. We had looked at Cairo to Cape Town, but majority of my security work was in Africa, so I'd been to those places anyway. So for me, I wanted to, as part of the challenge, I wanted to see places that some places that I hadn't been to before, and also because of where you're starting and where you're finishing, you're going through all different temperatures and climates and things like that. And so Guinness came back. The world record when I applied for it was 125 days. 6 weeks later, when they came back, they said you were successful on the application. It had already been beaten by 8 days. So the new world record was 117 days.
Wow.
So that was my target. And my wife and I do a lot of charity work, and we have been doing since I met her, really. And do a lot of stuff with the military. As part of the Special Boat Service, ambassador for Scotland, and ambassador for British Legion, which is the oldest military charity in UK. But I'm going to name drop now massively. So Prince Harry and I are good friends, and we've known each other.
As you do.
Yeah, as you do. So him and I have been good friends for about 14 years, met each other on a military training course. And, he'd come to some of my events. I've been to some of his events. In Mozambique, in Tanzania, I had an intelligence fusion cell, which would identify smuggling routes for the ivory, which I could then relay back to him. So I was doing a lot of stuff in the background. So I rang him up and I said, look, I'm going to cycle the world's longest road. What campaign should we do it for? And this is back in 2016. So him and his brother and Kate were just about to launch a mental health campaign called Heads Together in 2017. And he said, would I do it for that campaign? And I said, yes, of course. So I now had the challenge, now had the campaign. And I set a target of £1 million.
Wow. That's a big ass target.
Yeah. Well, for me, it had to be the enormity of the challenge had to reflect how much you were trying to raise. You couldn't, you can't say I'm going to raise £1 million and run the London Marathon, because it just doesn't add up. But the size of the challenge and the size of the ask here, was balanced. And also to add to that I'd never cycled before as well, which is even more of a
mental. Yes.
Yeah. So I trained for a year. You can imagine what it was like trying to get sponsorship at the beginning. Like,
what the hell?
Yeah, never cycled before. Going to break a world record and raise £1 million for mental health. I think a lot of them thought I had mental health problems myself, but
you had a track record of what you'd done. I mean, I would have taken you seriously if I was them.
A lot of people say to me, how do you get sponsorship? Because I got great sponsors, and it was the right messaging at the right time. The Heads Together campaign had just launched in the UK, and it was very much the topic of conversation. So a lot of these big corporates wanted to get behind
Wonderful.
Yeah. So it was the right messaging at the right time. And I got a great sponsor, and which, but that was only about 2 months before I was setting off. I'd funded it. I funded 50,000 of my own money up until then.
Yeah.
But I had to believe in it, and I had to
to put something on the line. Yep.
Yeah. So that's what I did. Yeah. I mean, I set off on the 1st of February 2018. When I was doing at the early stages, when I was doing the planning, and I'd never cycled before, I just took a military set of orders, put it on there, and just crossed out ammunition. And then as I started learning about cycling, I then introduced that into the plan. But there's things that, there were things that were out of my control, but natural disasters, coups, third-party influence. So the world record was 117 days, but I was aiming for 110, and it wasn't because I wanted to beat it by a week. I wanted to give myself
that buffer.
That buffer, yeah, the fudge we call it, yeah, the fudge.
Yeah.
Couldn't encounter that. It's eating into the fudge and not your challenge. So that's why I set off aiming for 110 days. Wow. I was very fortunate to been in the military and worked in the desert, the Arctic, and the jungle and things like that, but I'd never done it on a bike. I had to then simulate those situations. So the Atacama Desert in Chile is the driest, non-popular desert in the world. It was 47 degrees when I was cycling through. So I went out to Dubai and did 2 weeks heat training in Dubai. The altitude in Ecuador, I was cycling, the biggest climbs in the Tour de France range between 21 and 23 kilometers. Mine was 67 kilometers from sea level to 4,500 meters. So I had to train at altitude. So I know that on the day of the event, you can do 8 to 10 hours on the bike non-stop.
At altitude too. Yeah.
So did that, and there's a famous bike ride in UK called Land's End John O'Groats.
Yes, I know that one.
Yeah, so I did that twice. I never mean to sound arrogant, but for me it was a training ride, and I had to watch it as a train ride because the challenge was 15 Land's End John O'Groats back to back. So if I couldn't do one, how was I going to do 15?
It's funny how your perception changes. The bigger your current goal that you're going for, the other stuff becomes small. But what I've learned too is it goes the other way as well. When you stop, doing the big stuff, your horizon comes back in pretty quickly. And then, it can be going the other way.
You can never replicate what you're going to do with some of your ultra marathons. You wouldn't go run the exact distance.
No,
So
never.
You just,
never any near it.
Yeah, what I got from doing those Land's End John O'Groats, I did in about 9 days, is the fact that the first 4 or 5 days are always, whether you're at your peak or whether you're below peak, is always going to be hard.
Yep.
And then, but by the end of the first week, your body then knows what you're asking of it.
I found that too when I did, because I ran through New Zealand and I did 2,250 Ks in 42 days, which I was aiming for 33 days, but I didn't add in the fudge, did I? And I got slower and slower and more injuries and so on. So it took me a bit longer than I was planning. But at the 2 week point was when I was at the absolute, I don't know how to take the next step.
Oh, really?
Point. And somehow I had to drop the kilometers a little bit, but then I was able to, my body actually got better from that point on. And I would never have believed it if I hadn't lived through it, that I thought I was absolutely, I don't know how I'm going to take the next step, to then actually at the end of the 42 days being I could carry on now, and it was quite a phenomenal thing to go through. And I've heard other expeditions that are athletes go through the same sort of thing, that it bottoms out at the worst point. I've got a couple of mates who ran across the Sahara. I mean, right across the Sahara, 7,000 kilometers. And they had the same thing, that they, 2 weeks in, they were thought, we're about to die here. We're not going to make it. And then it's sort of, and you have your ups and downs, but if you can push through that mentally, that point, you seem to come through it, eh?
Yeah, you do. I think, for me, I set off from sort of going back slightly. When I was doing my research, I was reading books and magazines, learning about cycling. It evolved so much since I was a young boy in a BMX, and I wasn't getting the information I really wanted. So I spoke to the previous record holders, and they were very open, which was great.
Awesome.
They're very receptive. But they, one of the things we do in the military, especially special forces, is it's a hot debrief. So as soon as you've done a job or an operation, you come on. Before you sort yourself out, we'll sit down and we'll well, ask the 3 questions: what worked, what didn't work, and if you're going to do it again, what would you do differently? So I just asked that question to the previous record holders, and all their issues were in South and Central America, be it bureaucracy at the borders, languages, spares for the bikes. So they all started in North America, and it was the second half of the challenge which had the issues.
Right.
So I turned it on its head. I was well, I'm going to start in the South and get those issues out the way early. So that was one thing I was quite proud of. Just because everyone did it that way didn't mean it was the right way.
Yeah.
But I set off from southern Argentina, and the first week, relentless, the winds. It was like 40-mile-an-hour crosswind. I've never known anything like it. But once that I had targets each day, what I had to hit each day, and I was hitting those targets. I think by the end of the first week, I was 39 miles behind target, but my target was still a week ahead of the world record.
Right. Yeah.
Then the weather sort of changed for the better. The winds had subsided. I got through Peru. I got tailwind all the way through Peru. That's 2,500 kilometers of tailwind.
Wow.
We did, I crashed the bike in Chile. I got food poisoning in Peru. It didn't come without its issues. And, got to Ecuador, did the big climbings. But before I'd gone on the challenge, I'd never done more than 150 miles on the road. I'd done 10 hours on a turbo trainer, but never done more than 150 miles. By the week 4, when I was in Peru, anything less than 150 miles wasn't enough for me. I was getting physically and mentally stronger as I went. I started at 90 kilos. Everyone's like, too big.
Yeah, but you needed.
Yeah, but I knew from my time in the military, like Special Forces selection, 6 months long, you don't start day 1 100% fit. You carry a bit of timber and weight, and then that will shed, and then you'll get fit. And that's what I did. And, when I finished, I weighed 78 kilos. So I lost 12 kilos from this. So I had to, as you know, with your ultramarathon, it's almost like a polar expedition. You're losing weight from the start. So you just need to try and keep it on. But I got to Cartagena on day 48 on March the 21st. I took 10 days off the previous world record for South America. But that wasn't the world record. A lot of people called me and said, "Oh, that's it, the pressure's off." I was like, "Well, that's not the world record.
No.
I call it a Brucey bonus." That was the Brucey bonus, or a marker to aim for, rather than looking at the full challenge.
Yep.
As you all know, you don't look at the
no.
You break it down into.
You will get overwhelmed pretty quick.
Yeah, you wouldn't get on the flight. So I did. I broke it into countries, into days, and then broke the days into 4 stages.
Yep.
Nutrition and hydration were paramount. So just have a big breakfast and then just cycle as fast as I could for 2 hours. I then just get off the bike for 30 minutes, have food and water, and then I'm back on the bike. I was disciplined in my timings. It was 30 minutes. It wasn't 30 minutes and then chat to someone or have a selfie with a llama. It was like back on the bike. I mean,
that's key. That's key.
That creepage then gets bigger later on, and then it was just look at the next 2 hours, look at the next stage. I didn't look at the afternoon, didn't look at the next day. And before you've done it, you've done a day, you've done a week, you've done a world record.
Wow.
And so that's how I did it. So I was just doing 4 training rides a day. I wasn't doing a world record.
I love that. He just chunked that down into bite-sized pieces that you could manage.
Yeah, you can manage. And then you see people when they do a lot of people doing their challenges and they're like, well, I'm 10 miles behind today, I'll catch that up tomorrow. But you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You could have another bad day and then be 20 to 30 miles behind. So for me, to be in the right headspace mentally, I made sure I hit my target, so I was ahead of target. So after that first week, I was 39 miles behind target. From then on, I was way ahead. So I was in a good headspace at the end of the day, knowing that
you'd hit your mark
where I should be. Because as you probably accounted with your New Zealand, when you know that you've set a target and you may not get there, it can start messing.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Your head.
Yeah, it does. Yep.
So for me, I always say to people, just stay on the bike or do those, run an extra 2 or 3, just hit the target you set for the day, because mentally you're going to be in a better.
Because you get that nice dopamine hit then, that neurotransmitter dopamine that gives you that little reward, and that motivates you to do the next round and keeps you going,
Next morning, you're not right, I've got to do 30 miles before I get to the start. You're where you should be or ahead.
And it starts to overwhelm you, when you're starting to go backwards. I found that pretty.
I mean, I used to trick myself in the fact that or give myself a treat. So I had like 4 stages for North America. We'll talk in a minute. That's a different way of cycling. But for South America, because of the security issues, I had a support team and a documentary team with me who are very much more risk averse than myself. I stay on, but I had to consider their welfare. And so we would cycle. I would cycle from first light to last light. That was my my cycling period. And I broke it into 4 stages. So in the morning was fine because I just had a breakfast. So the first 2 hours, I'd be able to gauge how long I'll be on the bike for the day. Because unlike when other people go for bike rides at home, they'll go for a ride and they'll do a loop and they'll come home. So at some point they'll have a headwind or a tailwind or a side wind. But on this ride, if I had a headwind, it was all day. It was all day. So that would really...
It would gauge you.
Gauge for the rest of the day. So that was the first stage. The second stage, I had lunch to look forward to. The fourth stage, I had the end of the day to look forward to. The third stage, I had nothing to look forward to. So I would make sure... So my look forward was a can of Coke or an ice cream.
Yeah.
Just something simple.
Yep.
I had something to look forward to after the 2 hours.
Yeah. And that's that reward thing, eh? You just need that little, I'm going for something here.
Got something there rather than just, I've got another 2 hours after that.
I'd find that sometimes my reward, and this is getting like pretty sad, like, I'm going to be allowed to go to the toilet, like I'm going to have a wee. And you're like, shit, life's pretty shit when you're literally, when that's your reward.
Yeah. You need to probably look inwards a bit more.
What the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
And so, because I watched the little short, and can people watch the documentary yet? Is it out yet? Is it available?
No. So we've got the footage. We've got all the footage together. The sort of plan is maybe, because we'll talk about the next challenge shortly.
Yeah.
Bolting it onto that and doing a double.
Wow.
Series. We may do a series of them.
Wow.
So yeah, we're sitting on that, which is good. But yeah, I took. I broke the South America world record, which is great. And from a cycling perspective, it was a great decision going south-north. From a logistics perspective, it wasn't. We're having to change vehicles in every country in South America, which was slowing me up. So we bought an RV and a 4x4, which was going to get shipped from Fort Lauderdale to Panama. And that would then take us all the way to Alaska. Because I had to fly from Colombia to Panama. There's a Darien Gap, which you can't cross. That's the only bit you have to fly. And I was in Ecuador 2 weeks before. My wife, Alana, rang me and told me the vehicles hadn't been loaded on the container. They were still stuck in Florida.
Oh,
so my wife, my PA, and a couple of my friends, I think they had foresight, and they flew out and they drove the vehicles 4,000 miles in 8 days from Florida through Mexico all the way through Central America to Panama.
That's dedication.
Exactly. And so when I broke world record in the morning, flew across, they came in an hour late and handed over the keys. So that then really helped us for the second part of the challenge. I got to North America on day 70 and I was 14 days ahead. I was like, perfect. I can take the foot off the gas, or I can have a day's rest here or there. And then my wife kept ringing me. And, she's very good in keeping all those distractions away from me. So my initial thought was my children, there was something wrong with the kids. And then she told me we've been kindly invited to Harry and Meghan's wedding.
Oh, shit.
Changed the dynamics completely of the challenge. So for me to get home, I had to be finished by day 102, which was 15 days ahead of the challenge. So going into the phone call, I was 14 days ahead. 10 minutes later, I'm now a day behind.
Oh, my God.
It doesn't matter what you've done. That's just been taken from you. So mixed emotions cycling off from that phone call.
Like excited for the wedding. Shit, I've got to go faster.
And then I got to Lubbock in Texas the next day. We had 60-mile-an-hour winds and tornadoes. So I was stuck for another 24 hours. So I was now 2 days behind. And there was an app on your phone called Windy TV. I don't know if you've come across it. It gives you like the strength and directions of the winds every hour for the next 2 weeks. About 95% accurate. It was like my second wife on the challenge. Because
Windy TV.
I was looking at Windy TV. But unlike South America, where I said I was cycling from first light to last light, in North America, we had the luxury of
going a bit longer
security. You could cycle at night. So I took advantage of that. And I just played to get out of Lubbock. I had to cycle 340 miles in 36 hours to miss the next weather window. coming in, and I just played chess with Mother Nature through North America. I had 17 days planned, and I cycled it in 11 and a half days in Canada. But I also used it to my advantage. I picked up a tailwind in Cheyenne in Wyoming and did 260 miles in 11 hours with 10,000 feet of climbing because I had a 50-mile-an-hour tailwind.
Some luck and some...
Yeah, exactly. So it's talk about having a plan, but having to change the plan to the situation on the ground. And then I got a week outside and I was right, this world record smashed. I'll be back in time for this wedding unless I get eaten by a grizzly, because we're now entering Canada and Alaska. And then I was made aware about this professional cyclist who's got 3 other endurance world records. He's like 26 years old, sponsored by all Red Bull, all the brands. And he'd come out on social media that day and said that he was going to do the Pan American Highway in August and be the first man to do it in 100 days. So that just changed the dynamics completely for me. So
again,
yeah, so I just cycled, every time I thought I'd hit my objective, the objective then kept moving. So I cycled for 22 hours in the last 30 hours in -18 to come in 99 days, 12 hours and 56 minutes. So it wasn't the original plan. It's just how it sort of
way faster.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell anyone I'd been invited to the wedding. You can see friends commenting like, he's picked this right up. He's going, and people saying, oh, he's rushing back for his mate's wedding. I couldn't tell anyone.
Yeah.
So I just had to do it. But my family were in Alana, and the kids had flown into Prudhoe Bay, which is it's an oil field on the top of the Arctic Ocean. They'd come in with all these like oil workers who'd never seen kids there. Like, what's going on? And so I knew they were there at the end. So that was that final bit of motivation.
And when you're in that last spurt before the thing, it's like, I just get this shit done. You can get over the damn line.
even like the last 2 days, I had 250 miles to do, and I thought, well, I'll do 150 miles today, and then leaves me 100 miles on the last day, and I'm well in under the 100 days. So I did the first 50 miles and got to this roadblock at noon, and they were like, no, you can't pass till 8 o'clock tonight. So they took 8 hours off me straight. So I got into the RV, and again, I just put pen to paper even on the last day. But thankfully, because of the land of the midnight sun, it doesn't get dark. And I said, well, it's 8 o'clock tonight. I will cycle until I get there. And I cycled till 7 o'clock the next evening. But doing about 8-9 mile an hour because the winds were so strong.
Oh my gosh!
Making sure I was taking in coffee every couple of hours to stay hydrated. So even to the very last day, the plans. Yeah,
that's insane.
We crossed the line. From any cyclists out there, it worked out 99 days. So I had 5 days off, 3 due to weather and 2 logistics. So it was 94 days of cycling, which was 147 miles a day. I lost 12 kilos in weight. The average speed was 16.8 mile an hour, which was fast because it was just short, sharp sessions. And more impressively was the money we raised. We raised over $1.2 million or $900,000.
You're kidding me? That is insane.
Yeah.
Wow! Congratulations. That's gold.
Yeah, the majority of that was through corporate donors and sponsors. My PR team were like, this guy's showing no emotion. They like to see people suffering in tears, put their hands in their pockets. But for me, I was trying to promote the unrelenting pursuit of excellence. If you're going to do something, you do it to the best of your ability. So me crying on the camera wasn't going to happen.
There was a few tantrums on there, eh?
Yeah. There's a few. So, but that was it. Yeah. So I never looked. We came back 2 days later. We had the royal wedding, which sort of then for me overshadowed everything I did. All the press was like, "How was the wedding?" I was like, "Really? I've just smashed." They weren't care.
That's a bit sad, really, isn't it?
It is. I wish I'd had a bit of time to sort of absorb what I'd done and achieved. I was still just getting used to being with my family. Never mind. Go back.
Bloody Harry and Meghan, they could have waited another week for you to get your shit together and go.
Exactly. So,
what were they thinking?
The world's press doing 11 interviews each day until. But, it adds. We talk about it. You'll know as well, but you have a depression when you come back. You need paper and things like that. For me, I had 2 highs in 1 week. and then it was like, it was nothing.
Boom. Yep.
But we had a big fundraiser 6 weeks later, and Harry came, did a Q&A session on stage, and we raised a lot of money. So that was my sort of short-term focus after the bike ride. I was supposed to taper my training. I did a 10-mile bike ride to the coffee shop, and when I came back, I'm very objective. I need to have a target or something to go for. So just to go cycle 10 miles wasn't. On the way back, these 3 cyclists spotted me. I'm sure that's that lad. And I just ended up eating my PB for that straight. So I knew I wasn't actually going to be tapering. So I just put the bike in the garage and didn't
left it.
Yeah.
That's really, if we could just touch on the mental health side of it afterwards, because that's something that I've found after every big thing that I've done, especially when it's been an overseas environment and some out of it place or something, and you come back and you're like, you come back to your family, especially when your family not involved, and they're like, everyone else is just going about their normal business, and you're like, just like,
buzzing.
Do you know what I just did and experienced? And everyone's like, oh, that's nice, darling. And you're like, it's really, I found that quite devastating at times where when your family just didn't get, and you feel like a fish out of water, sort of like have this bit of a crisis of and you also have a crisis of like, what is my role in life? Like when you got out of the army, it's like, well, hang on, my whole bloody safety net of who the heck I am and the framework that I've built just suddenly been taken from me. Now what the heck I am, and then you've gone and become this adventure athlete and doing this crazy sort of stuff, so you've filled that void, if you like. With my mum's story, the same book name that we've got, like, that was relentless. I was suddenly thrown into this new world of like, I'm no longer an athlete. I couldn't be a full-time, or I was always working, but I was an athlete at the same time. And now it was just mum, like full board to rehabilitate her or she's going to die. So you adapt. Everything becomes the ability of the human mind and body. You go through a transition phase, but you learn to adapt. And for a couple of years, I found it hard. It's like, who the heck am I if I'm not that anymore? And I'm not doing that, but you have other priorities. It's like you've got kids now and stuff, and you don't want to be in dangerous situations. I was still evolving.
Yeah, I was probably used to that because of the time in the military. When it was the same sort of situation. You'd be away on tour and you come back. Everyone's just going back there. Back with their normal day-to-day business. And there's no point in trying to sort of, so I was used to that anyway from the military and in the private security. I think where I'm lucky with Alana and the kids is that they get fully immersed in it. So they're part of that project as well,
That's
so
awesome.
They come out to, my daughter cut her hair. She had really long hair, cut her hair and raised £1,000 for the charity. So they really get involved in everything. Alana does the campaign and the fundraising. So it's not me and then the family coming back to the family. They're in that with me. So I think I'm very lucky in that aspect. Yeah. You
are pretty lucky, I reckon, with your family. You've got a pretty good bloody combo with your wife. And
I generally believe that anyone, and I don't mean to sound arrogant, but anyone can break a world record. If you take away all those distractions, the business, the mortgage and things like that, and then who's looking after the kids, who's picking the kids up from school, and all you've got to concentrate on is
I totally hear you, because I think that's the actual key to it. When you've got the luxury, and it is a luxury now, not having that luxury, to be able to be a selfish athlete who can do what and can focus fully, and then you can of course you're going to do crazy amazing things. Unfortunately, life does come and chuck curveballs at you, and you have to go with the flow, but it doesn't negate what I've decided too is like, and reaching an age now, like my body started to break to pieces by about 48, things were going pear-shaped. Is that it doesn't negate what you did. And, because, you sort of have this mentality, I'm has-been, I'm been there, done that. No, it's just like, okay, it's a new stage in your life, and what is the challenge now? And there is some other big challenge that you're on. And you've got speaking of big challenges, so you've got some other crazy mission coming up. Tell us about that before we wrap it up.
So my unique selling point in in the athlete world is I take a sport or discipline I've never done before. So, we've done the cycling. Actually, going back slightly, when our sponsorship marketing team did the SWOT analysis on the last one.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
That's Mum ringing in the middle of my bloody podcast.
Relentless. The strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and threats. And the only weakness that came back was my arrogance towards the cycling community. But, thankfully no one ever said that, but I took that as a strength. It's that fire in the belly to say, well, if that's what they think, then watch this. But no, no one ever said that anyway, so it was good. But now I've enjoyed cycling. I'm now going to be arrogant towards the kayaking community.
Go and do that.
I actually take that back. The kayaking community have been really, really great in coming around on this challenge. So I've cycled the world's longest road. The plan is next year, 1st of February, I set off, is to kayak the world's longest river from source to sea, from Rwanda to Egypt, which has never been done before, as in paddled from one end to the other. There's been stages, but never completely. So 4,280 miles is that one. But unlike the last challenge, which was promoting mental health, I'll still always be an ambassador and push the importance of physical activity and mental health. This one, my wife's very passionate on modern slavery and human trafficking, and doing a lot in that area. But I didn't want to channel myself down just that one topic. So I've left it open. And so we're going to be talking about poverty, pollution, sustainability, conservation.
Amazing.
6-episode documentary. And really, for me, promote Africa. We've talked about the security industry and how people see that continent from what they see on the TV. For me, it's my favorite continent. I love Africa. And I know the people don't have two coins to rub together, but they're probably the most friendliest, happiest, and hospitable people.
Totally.
So I really want to sort of promote that as well. And unlike the bike ride, which was more physical, this is, there's a lot more skill involved in this. It's everything from flat water to grade 6 waterfalls.
Isn't there some big waterfalls and stuff in there?
You've got crocodiles, you've got hippos, you've got civil war in South Sudan. So it's gonna have some issues along the way.
You're going to have some more adventures, and I can't wait to hear all about those. I have to actually connect you. I had on the podcast last week a lady by the name, a fellow countrywoman of yours, Laura Penhall. And Laura is, she rode across the Pacific, and she's a bit like you. She never rode before when she took on this challenge. So she did it with 3 other ladies. She got a team together. You have to have a listen, and I'd love to connect you guys, because she might be able to, I mean, it's a different rowing, kayaking, but pretty phenomenal lady as well.
No, amazing. Yeah, no, please do. Yeah, but I've left this one open. If anyone wants to come join me at any stages, they're more than welcome. We approached Guinness about being a world record, and Guinness, no one's ever done it before, so they just took the Amazon guidelines and dropped it on this. But Amazon's a different river. Amazon's quite flat, and they said, you're only allowed to use one boat. But if that was the case, I'd be carrying the boat halfway around. So we then changed it to self-propelled by paddle, which means I can use either a ocean ski, a creek boat, or a raft. But actually then in reflection, looking at it, when you do Guinness World Records, there's so many guidelines, strict guidelines you need to adhere to, which is fine when you're cycling on a road or something like that. When you're paddling a river, it's never been done before. I mean, there's civil war, there's animals that are going to eat you, and things like that. You're going to have to make some key decisions, and you don't want your decisions to be blurred because you've got to stick to these guidelines. Yeah. So actually, we just pushed that out and said, well, we're not going to do it for world record.
It's not about that.
First anyway, we'll collate the data, but I don't want that to sort of hinder any wrong decision.
And I think it stands on its own, Guinness World Record or not, that's not, I don't know. It's not so important. This is about the actual adventure you're going to go on. That's crazy.
More about the adventure, yeah.
So where can Dean? I'm just absolutely fascinated by your mindset and the way that you approach things and all the stuff that you do. And I'd love to have you on at another stage in the future, and your wife, because I think we need a double episode to find out what the hell makes a lady like that tick as well. But where can people follow you, get involved with your project, the next one that you've got coming up, your book, etc.?
So I'm obviously on social media. You know, social media for me was a taboo when I did the last challenge, because Special Forces was like, you know, I now understand it's a platform where you need to be sort of promoting. So I am on Instagram as Dean Stott, and then I am on Twitter at Dean Stott SBS, and normal Facebook. And so I'll start, you know, later on in the year, you'll start seeing posts of me training and, you know, talk about my nutrition and things I didn't really do before, because I didn't think people were interested, but they clearly are in that and in the mindset. So we have that. And then the website, www.deanstott.com.
Dean Stott with 2 T's.
We've got the Frogmen on there, and then you can, and we're going to be posting up there as well. You can buy the book from there, or you can get the book from Amazon or audio.
And it's got the same title as mine. So buy both Relentless books, people, when you're on Amazon or wherever the heck you are. Both buy Relentless. Both Dean Stott was one and my one. That would be really, really good. Dean, is there any last words that you want to share, like to people out there listening who are just over, you know, like look at someone like you and they just go, well, you know, he's amazing and I could never be like that. What's your words to them?
Yeah, you know, I always say don't compare yourself to other people. You know, the problem we have nowadays is social media, and the people like, well, I can't do that. You know, well, you're not that person. You're unique. You know, I did it when I was doing the cycling. People are like, oh, you need to look at Mark Beaumont. I'm not Mark Beaumont, and things like that. So don't worry about what other people are doing. Just focus on yourself. You know, I always say anticipation is worse than participation.
Yeah, I love that. I quoted that on my Instagram yesterday from you.
A lot of people will tell you why they can't do it. You know, but just block out those outs, and just take it in bite sizes. What I say, you know, if you're going to, for example, a marathon, 26 miles, you wouldn't go try and do 26 miles. You probably wouldn't achieve it. I mean, you'd be so deflated and your self-esteem, but just set yourself a manageable target, 5 kilometers, hit that, and then you just grow from there. That's what I'd say.
That's some fabulous advice. Dean, thank you so much for your time today. You're an absolute superstar. I, you know, am in awe of your